Next on Currents News, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo pushing for the highly contested Child Victims Act in his State of the State address. Why New York Diocese strongly oppose the bill. New details about the much-anticipated February summit at the Vatican, where bishops and the Pope will meet to discuss how to address the sex abuse crisis. A deadly day for U.S. troops in Syria after a massive explosion rocks a war-torn city. ISIS taking responsibility for the attack. Plus, day 26 of the government shutdown. President Trump inviting lawmakers to the White House to bang out a deal, but that seems more like a dream at this point. The news starts right now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. In his State of the State yesterday, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo continued his push for the passage of the so-called Child Victims Act. The bill would lift the statute of limitations on sex abuse claims and would allow anyone to file suit against an organization regardless of when the alleged abuse occurred. The Catholic Church is opposed to that measure. Currents News' Tim Harfman is here with the details. Tim, what's the latest?
Liz, he's a Roman Catholic governor that is often at odds with church teaching. But this time, Governor Cuomo used the words of Pope Francis to justify an act the Catholic Church has opposed for years.
And the Child Victims Act.
Governor Andrew Cuomo laying out his budget in the State of the State Tuesday, saying this is the year he is planning to pass the long-denied Child Victims Act.
I am fully aware of the position of the Catholic Church and the opposition of the Catholic Church. I happen to be Roman Catholic. I'm a former altar boy, and my relationship with the Church is important to me.
There's been a battle in Albany for years between this Catholic governor and the Catholic Church over the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse. Under the current law, survivors of clerical sex abuse cannot press charges against the abuser after the survivor turns 23. The Child Victims Act would change that.
Thank you.
The governor wants to raise the age limit to 28 in criminal cases and as old as 50 in civil cases. The act would also open up a one-year window for all past victims of child sexual abuse to file a civil claim, no matter how long ago the abuse took place. In a 2016 video, the Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, said the Diocese of Brooklyn can be committed to helping victims of clerical sex abuse, while still challenging the Child Victims Act.
To make it a legal issue where we have to go to court and try to defend these cases is an intolerable burden. That's why we are opposed to turning back the statute of limitations. We are for helping victims.
The bishop says another reason for opposing the act: time passes and memories become murky.
Over time, people's memories fade, evidence is not available, witnesses are not available. So to put that, repeal it, to go back without actually any limit, go back 100 years, is very unfair, because how do you defend anybody, or how could they defend themselves when you have that problem?
Cuomo used the words of Pope Francis to bolster his argument, saying the church must punish priests as the crimes leave victims alive but destroyed.
I say we stand with Pope Francis and we pass the Child Victims Act this year, because if you believe in justice for all, then you believe in passing the Child Victims Act.
The hundreds in attendance gave Governor Cuomo a standing ovation after quoting the Holy Father, but the church's position is that it feels singled out. The New York State Catholic Conference has said it believes the bill would only apply to private institutions, giving public institutions like schools and the government a pass. Liz?
All right, Tim, thank you so much. As you know, in 2002, the U.S. Conference Catholic bishops established what is known as the Dallas Charter to combat and prevent sexual abuse. And some of the measures include creating the Office of Victim Assistance to help individuals who come forward with allegations of abuse. The office provides counseling, referrals for therapy, and other important resources. Every employee of the Brooklyn Diocese, including students, undergoes mandatory training designed to spot the signs of abuse and how to stop it. Bishop DiMarzio meets with survivors. He listens to them carefully. One result of those talks is the annual Mass of Hope and Healing in the diocese. And please keep in mind the diocese also also has a toll-free and confidential sexual abuse reporting line. The number is 888-634-4499. And for even more information, go to the Diocese of Brooklyn's website, dioceseofbrooklyn.org, and click on Protecting Our Children. The Vatican released more details about next month's summit, during which bishops from around the world will meet with Pope Francis. They're gathering to discuss a global approach to handling new concerns about the sex abuse crisis. Melissa Butts has more from the Vatican.
The four papal elected organizers for the February Summit on Abuse met with Pope Francis on January 10th. In that audience, Pope Francis confirmed his attendance for the entirety of the meeting and also stated his mission and goal for the summit. On Wednesday morning, the Holy See publicly announced the mission of the three-day February Abuse Summit in the Vatican, nearly 1 month before leaders from every Episcopal conference in the world come to Rome to attend. The papal spokesperson stated that for Pope Francis, this meeting has a clear objective.
The goal is that all of the bishops clearly understand what they need to do to prevent and combat the worldwide problem of the sexual abuse of minors.
The Pope advises that the meeting is not an academic seminar, but an occasion for prayer and discernment, from which concrete results should be obtained.
It is fundamental for the Holy Father that when the bishops who will come to Rome have returned to their countries and their dioceses, that they understand the laws to be applied and that they take the necessary steps to prevent abuse, to care for the victims, and to make sure that not cases covered up or buried.
The meeting will take place at the Vatican from February 21st to the 24th. In addition to seeking global solutions to the scourge of abuses, the bishops will participate in a penitential liturgy. Pope Francis has appointed Father Federico Lombardi, a former Vatican spokesman, to moderate the summit and its work. There will be around 180 people in attendance at the summit, including the bishops, leaders of religious communities, and also, most importantly, abuse victims. The Vatican has announced the next press conference on the summit will be February 18th. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News. Back to you in New York, Liz.
Thank you, Melissa. Cardinal Donald Wuerl is apologizing tonight in a letter to D.C. priests, saying that he forgot about allegations he received against now ex-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Cardinal Wuerl says in 2004, while he served as the Bishop of Pittsburgh, he did receive a complaint about McCarrick, a report that was allegedly forwarded to the Apostolic Nuncio, Archbishop Gabriel Montalvo. In his letter, the Cardinal apologized to priests and the survivor who filed the complaint, saying, quote, "I wanted to apologize for any additional grief my failure might have also brought to the survivor. My hope is that now that all of this matter is public and the Holy See is adjudicating the allegations against Archbishop McCarrick, my apologies might be of some help." ISIS has claimed responsibility for a deadly explosion that killed U.S. service members in Syria early Wednesday as they were conducting a routine patrol. The attack carried out by a suicide bomber with an explosive vest. Omar Jimenez has that story.
It came in an instant. An explosion in a crowded Syrian street killing multiple U.S. service members. A representative for the U.S.-led coalition Operation Inherent Resolve confirmed the casualties in a tweet. Quote, U.S. service members were killed during an explosion while conducting a routine patrol in Syria today. We are still gathering information and will share additional details at a later time. All of this comes in the midst of President Trump's announcement that the U.S. is withdrawing its forces from Syria.
My concern by the statements made by President Trump is that you had set in motion enthusiasm by the enemy we're fighting.
During a confirmation hearing for Attorney General nominee William Barr, Senator Lindsey Graham urged President Trump to reevaluate his strategy.
I hope the president will look long and hard about what we're doing in Syria.
ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack, less than a month after President Trump made this announcement.
And we have won against ISIS. We've beaten them, and we've beaten them badly. We've taken back the land, and now it's time for our troops to come back home.
Last week, the U.S. began withdrawing some military ground equipment from Syria, but there is still no firm date on when the roughly 2,000 troops stationed in the country would leave. Prior to Wednesday's attack, only 2 service members had been killed in action in Syria since the start of the campaign in 2014. In Washington, Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
Calls are growing for Republican Congressman Steve King to resign after making remarks defending white supremacy in a report published by the New York Times. The House of Representatives voted 424-1 for a resolution condemning white supremacy and white nationalism following King's comments. As a result, the Iowa congressman won't be serving on any committees this Congress. King even voted for the resolution.
This resolution that the House of Representatives once again rejects white nationalism and white supremacy and hateful expressions of intolerance that are contradictory to the values that define the people of the United States. I agree with that language I've said.
The only congressman who voted against the resolution, Democrat Bobby Rush of Illinois. Rush says the resolution didn't go far enough. Both Republicans and Democrats are pushing for King's resignation. In an interview with national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, Iowa's Bishop Walker Nicholas calls King's comments totally inappropriate, adding, quote, "This might be an occasion for all of us to examine our attitude towards acceptance of others different from ourselves in our personal lives and in our public policies. We should treat all people with dignity as they are created in the image of God." President Trump met with lawmakers at the White House today as the government shutdown marks its 26th day. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is calling on the president to postpone the State of the Union address next week. Natasha Chen is in Washington with the latest.
Lawmakers continue to meet, some of them even going to the White House to try to end the shutdown. But unless that can happen this week, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says it may not be safe to hold the State of the Union in the House chamber.
There's hundreds of people working on the logistics and the security of it. Most of those people are either furloughed or victims of the shutdown.
It's the Speaker's prerogative to invite the president to make this speech on Capitol Hill, and the invitation was for January 29th. But in a letter today, Pelosi suggested moving the date, giving a written speech, or giving the speech from the Oval Office. Later, Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen tweeted, "The Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Secret Service are fully prepared to support and secure the State of the Union." Meanwhile, furloughed U.S. Coast Guard members missed their first paycheck on Tuesday.
At the end of the day, we're a military family. I'm a Coast Guard spouse, and yes, we're proud to be here and serve, but at the same time, it's a little disheartening to have to reach out to people for money or take community resources.
People around the country are pitching in to help, from a food pantry for Coast Guard members in Oregon to free hot meals for struggling government workers by Chef Jose Andres in the nation's capital. In Washington, Natasha Chen, Currents News.
New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is tossing her hat in the ring for the 2020 presidential race. The Democrat made the announcement last night during an interview on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. She later took to Twitter saying, in part, quote, "Tonight I announced that I'm preparing to run for president because I believe we're all called to make a difference. I believe in right versus wrong, that wrong wins when we do nothing." New York state lawmakers voted to ban gay conversion therapy. They also approved a measure to add gender identity to the state's anti-discrimination laws. Governor Andrew Cuomo is expected to sign those bills. Under the new laws, therapists will not be able to attempt to change a minor's sexual orientation. It will also become illegal to discriminate against a person based on gender identity for housing and jobs. British Prime Minister Theresa May gets to keep her job. May was up against a no-confidence vote today, which she won by a narrow margin. A yes vote would have most likely ousted May from office. Today's vote comes one day after a stunning defeat of her Brexit plan. The proposal was overwhelmingly rejected by Parliament. It's not clear on what will happen next, as the deadline to exit the European Union looms in March. There's a lot more news headed your way. We take a look back at some of the preparations for the upcoming World Youth Day event. Up next, the Brooklyn Diocese holds a mass for those pilgrims traveling to Panama next week. And the story of two sisters preparing to go back to their home country to connect with Pope Francis and fellow Catholics. And Currents News' Emily Drewby takes us inside Brooklyn's first marijuana clinic. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@thesalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Pilgrims from the Diocese of Brooklyn attending World Youth Day in Panama celebrated a special mass this past Sunday. Next week, they'll join thousands of other Catholics and Pope Francis to strengthen their faith. Currents News' Tim Harfman has the story from Douglaston, Queens.
Pilgrims gathering in prayer at the Immaculate Conception Center in Douglaston. Nearly 200 Catholics from Brooklyn and Queens flying to Panama for World Youth Day, a time to strengthen their faith through prayer, music, and fellowship.
It's going to be great. It's going to be like a scaled down version of the church. We're going to feel like we're really part of something bigger.
The Panamanian government expecting nearly 200,000 young Catholics, ranging from 16 to 35 years old. Father Gerard Sauer, director of pilgrimages for the Brooklyn Diocese, encourages pilgrims to hear God's call.
Just remain open to what they see, to what they hear, to what they experience, and to not just make it something, World Youth Day is over. No, how did that impact my faith life?
Some of the highlights of the journey: Stations of the Cross, led by the Holy Father, the Vigil, which includes praying silently in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and the closing Mass.
I'm pretty excited to go. Last time I went was in Poland, and I got to see the Pope and just meet a bunch of Catholics from around the world, and it was just like a really exciting experience.
I feel like it would be a very good experience trying to increase my faith.
Since St. Pope John Paul II started World Youth Day in 1985, this will be the third time the international gathering will take place in Latin America. In Douglaston, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Two sisters from Queens are looking forward to returning to their homeland and praying with the Holy Father during World Youth Day. Once again, here's Currents News' Tim Harfman with their story.
It's called Central America. Say Central America.
Central America.
Second graders at St. Joachim and Ann School in Queens Village learning about their teacher's homeland.
And that's Panama City right here.
Aurelia Reed Thomas was born in Panama and came to the United States when she was 8 years old. Now she'll join thousands of young Catholics and Pope Francis at World Youth Day.
It was a perfect opportunity to do both, to also pray with the Pope, but at the same time to be able to see my country again.
She's traveling with her younger sister Yamitzla. They're parishioners at St. Gerard Majella Church in Hollis, Queens.
Panama.
The sisters were in Poland in 2016 when Pope Francis announced Panama would be the next host. This will be their third World Youth Day, but this trip is extra special.
My mother passed away about 2 years ago, and that was the last thing that she wanted to do, is to go to Panama. And so my sister and I going there is like us representing her.
But funding the trip hasn't been easy for Yamitzla. She says although her sister is helping out and her church offered funding, she wanted to pay her own way, working double shifts at her job.
There's other people in the church that want to go, who want to go to World Youth Days and go to other events around the church that the church can help them with, so I didn't want to be selfish.
Now with World Youth Day just days away, these sisters are ready for the journey.
Going there and being a part of World Youth Day and like getting to express my faith and be with other people that I did, it was actually pretty amazing.
In Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Currents News will provide coverage of World Youth Day live from Panama next week. National correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, Crux Rome Bureau Chief Inez San Martin, who will be traveling with the Pope, and Currents News' Tim Harfman will be on the ground. Coverage begins January 24th at 9:45 a.m. Medical marijuana dispensaries are popping up across the U.S., and now that trend is coming to Brooklyn. While many experts say the drug will help treat various illnesses, other experts, including clergy, are issuing words of warning. Currents News' Emily Druby has details from Park Slope.
Liz, on Flatbush Avenue, just across the street from the Barclays Center, is the borough's very first medical marijuana dispensary. Sativa Medical sells cannabis oil, which can be used in things like vaporizer pens and capsules. Employee Colleen Hughes, who is also a patient, says medical marijuana has helped her manage pain she was treating with opioids.
Medical cannabis can actually help people bridge the gap between being bedridden and actually getting up and being able to wash your hands or do menial tasks.
But not everyone agrees. For years, Monsignor Joseph Nugent has worked to help recovering addicts. He says pot is a gateway drug.
It's ridiculous that you're using a substance that causes disease, addiction, to
ease the pain of other disease. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Bishop of Brooklyn Nicholas DiMarzio agrees. In an interview with Currents News last June, he talked about the dangers of pot, but he did mention a potential benefit.
It's a gateway drug, leads to further drug abuse. That's notwithstanding the medical benefits where, people are in the chemotherapy or something, very strictly regulated. It can be helpful to them.
Dr. Blanca Vasquez says CBD, a component of the plant, has changed the way epilepsy is treated, but patients using medical marijuana should remain under the care of their doctor.
They should have a great partnership with the doctor. It really is something that your doctor should be clear. What are the indications for the medical marijuana use? Because a lot of these products are not FDA approved.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from an addiction, Monsignor Nugent suggests reaching out to your local Catholic charities for a referral, or you can reach out to his parish of St. Paul and St. Agnes. In Park Slope, Emily Druby, Currents News.
Still to come on Currents News, colorful costumes and intricate dances. It's the Feast of Santo Niño. Up next, why this feast is so dear and near to Filipinos and their faith. We'll be right back. Music and dance fill a Diocese of Brooklyn church to celebrate a strong devotion Filipinos celebrate around the world. It's the story of Santo Niño, a small image with a big history. Currents News' Katie Engesser has more about the 30-centimeter figure that gave birth to Christianity in the Philippines.
A strong devotion through dance at the Basilica of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Sunset Park. The star of the show, the infant Christ, known as the Santo Niño in the Philippines.
I have a devotion for him, and I cannot express how much I depend on him.
All this represent thankful to Santo Niño because this is the one that make us Christian.
The image of the Christ child dates back almost 500 years when explorer Ferdinand Magellan set sail. Magellan landed on the island of Cebu in the Philippines and began spreading the message of Christianity. And it worked. The king and queen of Cebu and 800 other natives became Christian. When the queen was baptized, she was presented with the Santo Niño. Now, millions of Filipino people head to Cebu every January for the feast.
The day-to-day visits of pilgrims to that shrine is just a testimony to the faith of the Filipino people.
Auxiliary Bishop of Brooklyn, James Massa, once led a delegation from Brooklyn to the Philippines for an international Eucharistic Congress.
It's a devotion that's visceral, that really comes from deep within. And it's the image and the Catholic faith, has really held the people together.
And the faithful continue that tradition in Brooklyn.
It is very important because it symbolizes that kind of unity and being a Catholic. So it's just, we were born to it.
It revitalizes our zest for life.
In Sunset Park, Katie Engesser, Currents News.
And that is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.